why aren't we focused on larger buildings, larger multifamily buildings? And the reason was we were scared. It was, we didn't know, right?
Right.
We were afraid of what we didn't know. And we said, that's not a good enough excuse. That's not a good enough reason not to do something. And so, as I'm sure we'll go into, we came together, we set a very clear mission of focusing on finding a 100 unit apartment building or larger. We all kind of have different skill sets that round each other out, as John and I will share. And we just had a really clear mission. We got over that imposter syndrome hump, and we went and found an asset.
Welcome to the How to Scale Commercial Real Estate Show. Whether you are an active or passive investor, we'll teach you how to scale your real estate investing business into something big.
Todd Wheatley and John Bombaci collectively own over 300 units in Massachusetts and New Hampshire. They are both House Hacker Extraordinaires, and they also have a property management company that manages and operates over 400 units. Todd and John, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having us.
Absolutely. Guys, there's three questions I ask every guest who comes on the show. In 90 seconds or less, can you tell me, where did you start? Where are you now? And how did you get there?
Sure. So we first started with, actually, both of us started with house hacks. I started mine early, and then I met Todd, along the journey, and we kind of partnered up and built the thing from there. I did a 3-family house hack in Connecticut the year I graduated from college. Lived in one of the units, rented out the other 2, paid off all of my debt, thought I did a really smart thing. I worked in corporate finance for Fortune 100 companies for about 10 years before jumping into real estate full time. I jumped into real estate full time in 2019. I owned 30 units at the time. And that's when I met Todd. We actually helped him house hack a 5-unit using an FHA loan in Waltham, which could be a whole different podcast on how the heck we were able to do a 5-unit with an FHA loan. But it was his entry into the world, kind of got his beak wet. And then I think, a matter of months later, he quit his high-paying corporate job and jumped into real estate full time. And we found a big property to work together on, and it's been a partnership ever since.
That is cool. So Todd, you got a 5-unit, and then just a few months later, you're like, all right, I see the potential here. I'm out. I'm going to go do real estate.
That's about it, Sam. So caught the bug, met some good partners like John, and just the rest is history. So.
How did you guys decide, one, to partner up, and then how did you decide on a strategy?
I got really good at partnering up. One of the things I started saying is, I own the first 29 units by myself. We own the next 300 units with partners. The 29 units took up more of my time than the 300 units with partners. And so I got really good at partnering up. And with Todd, we just found, commonality of long-term buy and hold, large properties were kind of the thing that got us both interested. And so when those come across the desk, I partner up with Todd and a couple of the other, partners on that team. But our interests align, and I don't want to do anything by myself anymore. And so Todd was a natural fit when it came to those large assets.
That is really cool. I think what a lot of times people struggle with taking that next step into the larger asset space. They either think, hey, it's not for me, or it's too big, or they don't know how. Those are common hurdles, I think, that people are struggling to overcome. How did you guys find an effective way to scale into bigger assets?
John, you mind if I take this one?
Yeah, go ahead.
Perfect. So Sam, as John alluded to, we had similar backgrounds, both had personal portfolios. John started a real estate meetup here in the greater Boston area for like-minded investors to meet up. When COVID came, we had to shift to virtual. So we pivoted into a virtual meetup. And we had at one of those meetups, we had a guest speaker come and educate us on agency financing, commercial agency financing. And that really opened our eyes to larger assets. And it made us question that imposter syndrome that you just mentioned, right? The bigger stuff is for other people. Let's just stick with the stuff that we know. And after that meetup, we really sat down and questioned to ourselves. We said, why aren't we focused on larger buildings, larger multifamily buildings? And the reason was we were scared. It was, we didn't know, right? We were afraid of what we didn't know. And we said, that's not a good enough excuse. That's not a good enough reason not to do something. And so, as I'm sure we'll go into, we came together, we set a very clear mission of focusing on finding a 100 unit apartment building or larger. We all kind of have different skill sets that round each other out, as John and I will share. And we just had a really clear mission. We got over that imposter syndrome hump, and we went and found an asset.
Got it. I love that transition. So you went from 5 units, Todd, to your next buy was 100 units thereabouts?
Just about. My wife and I had about 10 units total, and we went to 130 pretty quickly, and it's grown ever since.
That's awesome. What has probably been the biggest surprise for you in going bigger, faster?
I think John hit the nail on the head, which is in a certain way, scaling has been easier. Not only because we have each other, we have partners, et cetera. We've established systems at scale, but managing 100 and something units under one roof is not necessarily 10 times harder than a 10 unit building. It actually, in our case, it actually becomes easier because there's economies of scale, both at the management and maintenance levels. And John, I don't know if you want to build upon the comment you made earlier, but we have just found that kind of growing, particularly in very tight geographies, has actually been easier than some of the smaller buildings.
Tell me this, and I don't know if John, if you're still with us or not. It looks like maybe we lost. Yeah, I think we lost John somewhere along the way. It's frozen on that end, but maybe I'll just ask you this, Todd. How have you guys, and one of the things we talked about before actually coming on the air, was finding your lane and staying inside of it. There you are. I see you now, John. You're back with us here. But finding your lane and staying inside of it. So how have you guys remained focused? You said, hey, we did small multifamily, and then you went into larger multifamily. I mean, shiny object syndrome is something that so many of us are plagued by. I certainly have had my own fair share of shiny object syndrome. How do you guys stay focused?
Yeah, it's a good question, Sam, and we've definitely fallen victim to the shiny object syndrome. When I go back to when we decided to focus on the asset class of large multifamily, when we sat down I really mean it, we sat down as a group in person, set that vision of what we wanted, the types of asset, and part of that conversation was, guys, we know we can focus on mobile home parks. We know we can focus on self-storage units. Maybe we will grow into those verticals, but right now there's so much multifamily, certainly value add multifamily, which is our primary focus. Let's get really, really good at that. Let's scale our systems, teams, and processes. And if we want to add on different niches of real estate, we'll do that intentionally, but let's basically pretend those things don't exist. And so it was just having a really clear focus, a really clear mission. And then as a group, we've held each other accountable. If somebody brings up a property or a project that falls outside of our kind of mission statement, we're very quick to challenge each other about, is this a distraction? What's the opportunity cost of going and doing that project versus continuing to do what we're already doing? So I think that's another benefit. Kind of an unspoken benefit of having team members and trusted partners is to hold each other accountable as well.
I think that's brilliant is to ask that question. And it's probably not one that's asked often enough, but what is the cost of chasing this other opportunity? That's a very powerful question. And I think you hit it on two fronts, asking that question, but also having partners that go, hey man, that's not our bread and butter. So let's just not. One of the things, maybe, I don't know if we said this on air, maybe talked about it off air, but that in your mission statement, you guys are finding cash flowing assets that roll off 10 to 12% on an annualized basis. How are you doing that today in the multifamily environment? Those are numbers I've just not seen a double digit cash on cash return in multifamily. I don't think any deal has come across my desk in the last 2 years. What's your secret sauce?
Finding the deals, right? And there's no magic bullet, but everything, John, keep me honest, but everything we've purchased has been direct to owner, direct to seller. So we're buying these assets at pretty deep discounts, certainly compared to kind of a brokered deal. And again, we're real estate professionals. We have a very successful agency, both in New Hampshire and Massachusetts, that primarily focuses on small multifamily. But when it comes to these larger assets, we're looking for folks that have owned these assets for a very long time. There's value add both through renovations and through particularly operations. So rents 20 to 30% below market. No technology. They haven't reviewed their service contracts in a very long time. And so the in-place lift is significant. And that's primarily where we're finding deals: word of mouth, wholesalers, and direct to seller marketing. So I think that's been a huge part of how we've been able to find the properties that meet kind of our cash flow targets.
People often. Oh, go ahead, John, please.
Oh, sorry. I was just going to say we've also gotten the reputation of buying the properties off of the worst landlord in the city. And so one of the habits we have is, when we buy a property, go to town hall, tell them who we bought it from. They're like, oh, thank God. And then they tend to give us a hit list of the second to worst landlord and the third to worst landlord, because we like the operational deficiencies, and a lot of times it's decent properties with bad management. And so once we take them over, a lot of times the cities are very happy, and more often than not, they actually give us a list of other properties they wouldn't mind if they changed hands.
Is that list curated based upon code violations, upon tenant complaints, things of that nature, that they just repeatedly see these landlords in court or in code, violation, those sort of things? Is that kind of how that hit list, if you will, is developed?
Yeah. Board of health violations, notice of violations, continuous problems with trash or just ugly from the outside. A lot of times when we talk to them, it's like, when was the last time that you guys have been in this building? And they're like, 5 years, 10 years. They want to get in, they want to do inspections, they want to check the fire systems, they want to do those types of things. But the most of the time, the lends we're buying off of them are pretty aggressively against allowing the city into the buildings.
How do you make a seller like you when they are that, I'm going to say, type of landlord? I think it sounds like acquiring assets like that could potentially be a adversarial buy. That's probably not the right way to say that, but is there a way or a strategy you guys use to have a very friendly transaction with a seller of that type?
I think we divide and conquer. So I think we have 4 members of the team. Myself and another member of our team, Matt, tend to try to befriend the sellers. We're the face. We meet them the first time. We walk the properties. For lack of a better word, we're kind of like the yes guys. Like, oh yeah, of course. We understand that you don't have any Section 8 units at this 132 unit property, and you're not violating fair housing laws. Like, I completely get that. You're awesome. Like, those types of things. And then on the back end, we got Todd and Nate in our legal team that are like, all right, how are we going to fix this? How are we going to, use this to our advantage later on? But I mean, we kind of divide the team where it's like, when there's bad news throughout the deal, it's coming from, within. When there's good news throughout the deal, we make sure it's coming from either, it's coming from a friendly face. And then we kind of play good cop, bad cop within our own organization to kind of make sure that the seller wants to talk to me, but Todd is the guy behind the scenes that's squeezing him on all the things that he's doing wrong.
I love it. I mean, and that makes sense. I mean, because it's one of those things where I feel like for us, we always work really hard to have, I don't want to be part of a deal that's toxic, like buying toxic deals. And it just, my life is too short where I have to surround myself with people like that. But I think having an effective strategy like what you guys have developed, where it's, because there is bad news sometimes to sellers. There is times when it's like, hey, this is, it's just, this is the state of your property, and this is what it's going to cost you in order for us to get this across the finish line. That's reality. But having a strategy for how you guys deal with that is really cool. Tell me about your team. How do you guys round each other out? How have you developed that team, and how did you figure out who was going to handle what seat on the bus?
Todd, would you like to take this?
Sure, happy to. So yeah, we all have, again, we all come from real estate. We all had real estate experience before we kind of dove full time into this. We all come from different corporate backgrounds. So I was in information technology, John was in insurance. So we all have kind of a professional corporate background, but in different kind of angles and perspectives. And we set out, so both us as managers and sponsors, we set out having very clear kind of roles. So as John mentioned, we have somebody that focuses on acquisitions and negotiations. We have others that focus on investor relations and tax. We have others that are focused on financials and operations. So having those clear lanes within our team, especially, and then as you alluded to in the open, Sam, we've built teams and processes for our companies, including property management, maintenance technicians, in-house accounting, mortgage brokering. And so we've added those very specific partners to the team and those people to the team as we've grown. And we've done that through our organic network. I mean, one thing that John hasn't really mentioned, but he should be very proud of, and I'm proud to be a part of it, is he established these networking events. We have hundreds of people, both past clients, peer investors, folks of all different angles of the industry, and that has become our real estate network. And we can often tap people in that network to play these really, really important roles as we grow. And we have the familiarity with these folks. We know what they can do. And it's a win-win. It's a symbiotic relationship, because as we grow, we create these needs, and they can then kind of jump on the bus and help us bring it to the next level, so to speak. So hasn't been easy, as I'm sure John would attest to, but it's been very fun. We've developed most of these functions in-house so that we can kind of have that control over our portfolio and the operations. And it's been really fun few years.
That is awesome, John. I want to ask you a particular question about that. Starting up a meetup of that sort, growing it, what are some effective strategies maybe that you use that you would recommend to somebody else if they were thinking about doing the same?
I think the big push is very early on. We said no solicitation. So I think we've all been to those meetups where it's like, hey, you have 5 minutes of value, and then 45 minutes of me trying to sell you something. And we try to, we didn't want to be those people. So we do bring in guest speakers. They are people that are soliciting business, but the idea is they're not doing it while they're up there. They need to add value back to the group. I don't carry business cards when I'm at my own meetups. We're very, against solicitation at the meetups, and it's all about like adding value. And then people tend to reach out the next day or the next Monday to, if they're interested. But we've taken a very hard stance against people coming in marketing. And I think that's kind of gone a long way. And we put the content first, we put the people first, and then we even put ourselves second, in terms of actually garnering business from it.
That's really cool. And what a unique way to build out, to Todd's comment, to build out your team. I mean, if you got a front row seat to the people that are doing deals, that are there, you get a feel for their skill sets, you get a feel for who they are. And then when it's time for you to bolt on a new member or a new position within the company, it's like, oh, I got how many ever people are in your meetup. It sounds like more than 100 that you can look at and go, hey, maybe this is somebody to bring on our team. Is that a fair analysis?
Yeah, I mean, I think up until recently, every new staff member has come from our bench, right? Has come from someone that, I stick on the bench every year. We kind of go through who's on our bench and what positions might be opening up, and we try to slot people in that we know. I think we just recently hired 2 maintenance technicians in southern New Hampshire that weren't on our bench because it was outside of our target area. But up until that point, everybody else has been hired from the network.
That's cool. And what an effective way to grow and scale versus, not I'm gonna call it spray and pray, but you're not out there putting lists on Indeed or anything like that, or posts on Indeed going, gosh, I wonder if this is going to be a good fit, hiring a random, and again, not that you can't hire good people that way, but how much more effective to be able to have a front row seat to who they are, how they behave, what type of business they work in. You get to know the person long before you ever have to actually or want to ever offer them a job. That's a really, really cool and effective strategy. Guys, go ahead. If you got more to say about that, please tack it on.
I was going to say, everyone presents their best self when you're doing an interview, right? You stick them in front of a meetup and say, hey, present something on your last fix and flip. And you can tell real quickly, the type of person they are based off of how they build the presentation.
Right. Oh, that's super smart. I absolutely love it. Guys, you've done incredible things. I mean, 2019, it sounded like, again, I think you said you own 30 units, maybe then, John, and I think Todd, by the time you guys partnered up, you had 10. That's pretty impressive growth here in just a few short years. You've given us a lot of things here to think about: leveraging partnerships, how to round out each other's teams, staying focused and staying in our lanes. I mean, that's a struggle, I think, for all of us. And you've certainly given us a lot of really cool and great things to think about here. Appreciate you guys coming on the show today. I've loved hearing your journey thus far. If our listeners want to get in touch with you or learn more about you or even your meetup, what is the best way to do that?
Best way would just be to go to our website, kendallrealty.com, or to reach out directly to myself or Todd. I'm sure we'll provide you with our contact information, and people can reach out to us directly.
Awesome. And if we can get that one time, just slightly slower there, that website again there, John, that way if we're just listening, we can make sure we can look it up. Maybe if we want to catch that up, just the audio only version. So what was that website again?
Sure. It's candorrealty.com, which is the name of our agency business.
Fantastic. We'll make sure you also include that there in the show notes. Todd and John, thank you again for coming on the show today. I certainly appreciate it. It was great having you guys on today.
Yeah, thanks, Sam.